Subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that touches your heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Officer Daniel Rivers adjusted his ceremonial uniform for the third time. His hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from anticipation. Today marked his first day as a royal guard, a position he had trained 5 years to achieve. The red tunic felt heavy on his shoulders, weighted with tradition and expectation. His black boots gleamed so brightly he could see his reflection. The tall bearskin cap sat perfectly positioned on his head. Daniel had dreamed of this moment since childhood. Growing up in a small village outside London, he would watch documentaries about the royal guards, mesmerized by their discipline and dedication. His father, a former military sergeant, had encouraged this dream while teaching him the values of service and sacrifice. His mother, a school teacher, had instilled in him compassion and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. These lessons had shaped Daniel into the man he was today, standing at attention outside Buckingham Palace. The training had been brutal. Physical conditioning that pushed his body to its limits. Mental exercises that tested his ability to remain focused and calm under extreme pressure. Hours of standing perfectly still while instructors would try to provoke reactions. Learning the history and protocols of the royal household. Weapons training. Emergency response procedures. Daniel had excelled in all areas, but his instructors particularly noted his quick decision-making abilities and his genuine care for public safety. Standing beside, Daniel was his training partner and friend, Marcus Webb. They had gone through the academy together, supporting each other through the most challenging moments. Marcus was shorter but stockier, with a serious expression that rarely broke into a smile. While Daniel was known for his empathy, Marcus was recognized for his analytical mind and tactical thinking. They balanced each other perfectly. The captain had deliberately positioned them together for their first assignment. The palace grounds were already filling with tourists. Families with children, elderly couples, students with cameras. People from every corner of the world gathered to witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony. The crowd pressed against the iron gates, phones held high to capture photos and videos. Daniel could hear the excited chatter in dozens of languages. Children pointed at the guards with wonder. Some tourists made silly faces trying to provoke reactions, but Daniel remained statue still. His eyes fixed forward, Captain Elizabeth Morrison walked along the line of guards, inspecting each one with practiced efficiency. She was a veteran of 15 years, known for her fairness and her exceptional judgment. She had risen through the ranks at a time when few women held such positions, earning respect through competence and unwavering dedication. She stopped briefly in front of Daniel, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of his uniform and posture. "First day, Rivers?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, Captain," Daniel replied, his voice steady and clear. "Nervous? Ready, Captain?" She nodded approvingly and moved on. Daniel felt a surge of pride. He had not disappointed her on his first inspection. The morning progressed smoothly. Daniel maintained his position with perfect discipline, aware of the responsibility he carried. He was not just a guard, but a symbol of tradition, stability, and dedication. Tourists continued their endless stream of photos. Parents lifted small children onto their shoulders for better views. Tour guides explained the history and significance of the guards to their groups. The sun climbed higher, warming the air and making the heavy uniform even more uncomfortable. But Daniel did not waver. Around mid-morning, a school group arrived. 30 children, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wearing matching blue jackets and supervised by 3 teachers. They gathered near the gates, their teacher explaining the importance of respecting the guards and staying together. Most of the children listened attentively, but one small girl with dark braids kept wandering toward the edge of the group. Fascinated by a pigeon pecking at the ground nearby, Daniel noticed the girl peripherally. Years of training had taught him to maintain awareness of his surroundings while appearing completely focused straight ahead. He watched as she drifted further from her group, following the pigeon across the wide plaza. One of the teachers called out, but the girl was too absorbed in her pursuit to hear. Other tourists moved between her and her school group, and within moments, she was separated from her classmates. The teacher began walking toward the girl, but the crowd had grown denser as another tour group arrived. Daniel tracked the girl's movement, noting that she had stopped chasing the pigeon and now looked around with growing confusion. Her small face showed the first signs of panic as she realized she could not see her classmates or teachers. She was perhaps 40 yards away now, standing alone in a sea of strangers. What happened next would later be described as the moment everything changed. From the corner of his vision, Daniel saw a man moving quickly through the crowd. There was something about his movement that triggered alarm. The man's focus was intense, directed at the lost girl. His pace was purposeful, but not panicked, like someone trying to help. His hand reached into his jacket pocket. Daniel's training kicked in instantly. He recognized predatory behavior, specific body language of someone with malicious intent. The girl started crying, small tears rolling down her cheeks as she turned in circles looking for familiar faces. The man was now 30 yards from her, closing the distance rapidly while most of the crowd remained oblivious to the unfolding situation. The girl's teacher was still trying to navigate through tourists. Calling the child's name but too far away to reach her in time, Daniel made a split-second decision that would define his life forever. Breaking from his ceremonial position, something guards were never supposed to do, except in the most extreme circumstances, he began to run. The sudden movement caught everyone by surprise. Tourists jumped back, startled. Other guards turned their heads, breaking their own discipline in shock. Captain Morrison's head snapped around, her expression shifting from surprise to alarm as she tried to understand what was happening. Daniel's boots pounded against the stone pavement as he sprinted across the plaza. The heavy bearskin cap flew from his head, tumbling across the ground. His ceremonial sword slapped against his leg with each stride. The crowd parted before him, people shouting in confusion and concern. Cameras that had been casually recording the static guards now captured this unexpected drama. Daniel's focus narrowed to 2 points: the crying girl and the approaching man. The distance between Daniel and the little girl felt infinite despite being less than 200 yards. Every second stretched impossibly long as his legs pumped harder, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The suspicious man had noticed Daniel's approach and suddenly changed direction, trying to blend back into the crowd. This confirmed Daniel's worst fears. An innocent person would have stopped or looked confused at the sight of a royal guard sprinting toward them. This man was fleeing. Daniel's mind raced through his training scenarios. Threat assessment, civilian safety, protocol for leaving post. He had violated standing orders by abandoning his position, but every instinct screamed that a child was in immediate danger. The man's behavior, his targeted approach, his quick retreat when confronted, all pointed to attempted abduction. Daniel could not stand by and watch, regardless of consequences. The little girl had frozen in place, her crying becoming louder as she saw the uniformed soldier running toward her. To her young mind, this must have been terrifying. A tall man in a bright red coat, face flushed with exertion, charging directly at her. She stumbled backward, her small legs tangling, and she fell hard onto the pavement. Her hands scraped against the rough stones, adding physical pain to her emotional distress. Daniel reached her in seconds that felt like hours. He dropped to one knee beside her, his voice gentle, despite his labored breathing. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. I'm here to help you find your teacher." The girl looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Up close, he could see she was even younger than he initially thought, perhaps only 6 years old. Her school uniform was now dusty from the fall, and her palms showed red scrapes that were beginning to bleed slightly. She hiccuped through her tears, trying to speak, but too upset to form words. Behind them, chaos erupted. The girl's teacher had finally broken through the crowd and was running toward them, calling the child's name. "Emma! Emma!" Other teachers followed, their faces pale with fear and relief. Tourist cameras captured every moment, though most people still did not understand what had just happened. Captain Morrison was also approaching, her expression unreadable but her pace urgent. Daniel stayed focused on the child. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently dabbed at her scraped palms. "My name is Daniel. What's your name? Emma, the girl whispered, her crying beginning to subside as she realized this man was not threatening, but kind. That's a beautiful name. Emma, your teacher is coming right now. See her? The lady in the blue jacket running toward us? Emma turned and saw her teacher. Fresh tears came, but these were tears of relief. She reached up toward Daniel, a universal gesture of a child seeking comfort. Without hesitation, Daniel lifted her gently into his arms. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. The teacher arrived, breathless and shaking. Emma, oh thank God. I turned around, and she was gone. I was so scared. She reached for the girl, but Emma clung tighter to Daniel, not ready to let go of her protector. She's all right, Daniel assured the teacher, just frightened and a bit scraped up. She'll need those palms cleaned and bandaged, but nothing serious. Captain Morrison reached them, Marcus Webb close behind her. The captain's face was stern, but Daniel could see something else in her eyes, something that looked like understanding mixed with concern. Rivers, explain yourself. Before Daniel could respond, Marcus spoke up. Captain, I saw it too. There was a man approaching the child with clear intent. Rivers acted on legitimate threat assessment. Daniel carefully transferred Emma to her teacher's arms. The little girl was still crying but had calmed considerably. She looked back at Daniel with something like hero worship in her young eyes. Thank you, she whispered. The teacher held Emma tight, tears streaming down her own face now. Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Captain Morrison's expression remained serious. Rivers, Webb, return to your positions. We'll discuss this in my office immediately after your shift. Please take your student to the medical station. We'll need a full statement from you about what occurred. As Daniel walked back to his post, he became aware of the crowd's reaction. People were clapping. Cameras were still recording. Several tourists approached him with words of praise, but he could not stop to acknowledge them. He retrieved his bearskin cap from where it had fallen and returned to his position. His uniform was disheveled, his breathing still elevated, and his heart pounded against his ribs. Marcus resumed his position beside Daniel. Out of the corner of his mouth, barely moving his lips, Marcus whispered, "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen." Daniel could not respond, but he appreciated Marcus's support. Standing at attention now felt different. The tourists looked at him with new eyes, not as a ceremonial decoration, but as someone who had just demonstrated the true purpose of a guard, protection and service. Photos and videos of his sprint across the plaza were already spreading across social media. Within hours, they would go viral. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Daniel maintained his post with perfect discipline, but his mind kept replaying the incident. Had he overreacted? The man had fled, which seemed to confirm suspicion, but Daniel had not actually seen a weapon or heard a threat. What if he had been wrong? What if he had abandoned his post and violated protocol based on a misreading of the situation? But then he thought of Emma's frightened face, her small arms around his neck, and he knew he would make the same choice again. Some things mattered more than protocol. A child's safety was worth any professional consequence he might face. When the shift finally ended, Daniel and Marcus reported to Captain Morrison's office as ordered. The captain sat behind her desk, several senior officers standing around the room. The atmosphere was tense. Daniel stood at attention, prepared for whatever punishment awaited him. Captain Morrison studied him for a long moment before speaking. Officer Rivers, you violated standing orders by leaving your post without authorization. You broke ceremonial protocol in full view of hundreds of witnesses and cameras. You created a situation that could have resulted in injury to yourself, the child, or bystanders. She paused, letting the weight of these violations sink in. Daniel's heart sank. He had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so formally made the consequences feel real and immediate. The captain continued, her voice softening slightly. You also potentially prevented a child abduction. You acted on sound tactical assessment of a genuine threat. You showed courage, quick thinking, and prioritized civilian safety over personal career concerns. The girl's parents have already called to express their gratitude. The Metropolitan Police have reviewed security footage and confirmed that the man you identified had been loitering near the school group for over 20 minutes before approaching Emma. They are currently trying to locate him. Daniel felt a wave of relief mixed with vindication. He had been right. The threat had been real. Captain Morrison stood from her desk and walked around to face Daniel directly. Her expression was complex, mixing professional severity with personal respect. Officer Rivers, this situation presents us with a significant dilemma. On one hand, discipline and protocol are the foundation of the Royal Guard. If every officer made independent decisions about when to break formation, chaos would ensue. On the other hand, we are not mere decorations. We are trained soldiers and law enforcement officers with a primary duty to protect. The other senior officers in the room nodded gravely. Colonel Richard Ashworth, the overall commander of the Palace Guard, stepped forward. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a chest full of medals from decades of distinguished service. His reputation for fairness was well known, but so was his insistence on maintaining standards. Officer Rivers, the colonel said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I have reviewed the security footage personally. I have spoken with the Metropolitan Police, with the child's parents and teachers, and with your training instructors. What you did today was extraordinary. You identified a threat that everyone else missed. You made a split-second decision that potentially saved a child from abduction or worse. For that, you have my personal gratitude and respect. Daniel felt a surge of relief, but the colonel's expression remained serious. However, the colonel continued, we cannot ignore the breach of protocol. If I commend you without consequence, I send a message that standing orders are optional. Other guards might break formation for lesser reasons, perhaps misjudging situations or acting on impulse rather than genuine threat assessment. The discipline we maintain exists for good reason. The room fell silent. Daniel understood the impossible position his actions had created. He had done the right thing for the wrong reasons from a purely military perspective. No written rule allowed for what he had done, even though common sense and human decency demanded it. Captain Morrison spoke again. We have discussed several options. Some have suggested a formal reprimand on your record. Others have argued for commendation despite the protocol violation. We have considered the precedent this sets and the message it sends to other guards and to the public. Marcus Webb, standing beside Daniel, seemed to hold his breath. The tension in the office was suffocating. Colonel Ashworth made his decision. Officer Rivers, you will receive a formal written warning for leaving your post without authorization. This will remain in your file for 1 year, after which it will be removed if you serve without further incident. However, you will also receive a commendation for bravery and quick thinking in protecting a civilian from imminent danger. These two actions, taken together, reflect the complexity of what occurred today. Daniel felt the weight of both judgments. He had succeeded and failed simultaneously. He nodded, accepting both outcomes as fair. Furthermore, the colonel added, you will participate in developing new protocol guidelines for similar emergency situations. Your experience today has highlighted a gap in our standing orders. We need clear procedures for when and how guards can break formation to address immediate threats. Your input will be valuable in creating these guidelines. This was unexpected. Daniel had thought his role in the incident would end with punishment and perhaps some scrutiny. Now, he was being asked to help shape future policy. The meeting concluded, and Daniel left the office with Marcus. As they walked through the palace corridors, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. A warning and a commendation. That's probably the best outcome anyone could have hoped for. Daniel nodded, but his mind was already moving beyond his own situation. Did they really confirm that man was targeting Emma? The police showed the captain footage from multiple angles. He had been watching the school group for at least 20 minutes. When Emma separated from her classmates, he moved immediately. They're treating it as an attempted abduction. They found his image on several cameras throughout the area, suggesting he had been there for hours. The confirmation made Daniel feel sick. To think what might have happened if he had remained frozen at his post following protocol while a child was taken? He could not imagine living with that knowledge. Over the following days, Daniel's action became international news. Videos of his sprint across the plaza were viewed millions of times. News outlets ran stories with headlines like "Royal Guard breaks protocol to save child," and "Hero in red, guard risks career for little girl's safety." The public response was overwhelmingly positive. People praised his courage and quick thinking. Parents especially expressed gratitude and admiration for his willingness to prioritize a child's safety over rules. Emma's parents requested a meeting with Daniel. The palace arranged a private gathering in one of the smaller ceremonial rooms. Daniel arrived in his dress uniform, nervous about facing the family. He had been trained for combat and ceremony, but not for emotional encounters with grateful parents. Emma's mother, Sarah, was a slight woman with the same dark braids as her daughter. She embraced Daniel before he could even introduce himself properly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my baby." Emma's father, James, shook Daniel's hand with a grip that conveyed both strength and emotion. "We cannot express how grateful we are. The police told us what that man likely intended. You gave us back our daughter." Emma herself was there, her small hands bandaged but her spirits high. When she saw Daniel, she ran to him without hesitation and hugged his legs. "The soldier who saved me," she announced proudly. Daniel knelt down to her level. "How are your hands, Emma?" "They're getting better. The doctor put special bandages on them. See?" She held up her hands to show him. "You're very brave," Daniel told her. "You're braver," Emma insisted with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You ran so fast. Like a superhero." The meeting lasted nearly an hour. Sarah and James asked Daniel about his training, his family, and his life. They wanted to know everything about the man who had saved their daughter. They spoke about the nightmare of those moments when Emma had disappeared into the crowd, the terror of not knowing where she was or if she was safe. "You gave us our daughter back," Sarah repeated. "Nothing we can say or do will ever be enough. Thanks for that." As Daniel left the meeting, he felt the full weight of what had occurred beginning to settle on him. He had changed the course of multiple lives in those few seconds of decision and action. Emma would grow up safe. Her parents would not carry the unbearable grief of losing a child. The trajectory of an entire family had been altered by his choice to run, but something else was happening too. Something Daniel had not anticipated. The physical toll of his sprint, the adrenaline, the stress of the aftermath, all of it had masked a growing problem. That evening, back in his quarters, Daniel felt an unusual tightness in his chest. He attributed it to stress and exhaustion. He had been through an emotional ordeal, and his body was simply reacting to the intensity of recent events. Over the next few days, the tightness persisted. Sometimes it felt like pressure, other times like a squeezing sensation. Daniel mentioned it to Marcus, who urged him to see the medical officer. But Daniel dismissed the suggestion. He was young and fit. He had passed every physical examination with exceptional marks. This was probably just anxiety or muscle strain from the sprint. 2 weeks after the incident, Daniel was assigned to work on the new emergency response protocols. He met with Colonel Ashworth and several senior officers to discuss guidelines for when guards could break formation. The meetings were productive, and Daniel felt honored to contribute to policy that might protect both guards and civilians in future situations. His chest discomfort continued, but he pushed through it, not wanting to appear weak or unable to handle his duties. During one particularly long meeting, Daniel felt the pressure in his chest intensify. He took slow, deep breaths, trying to appear normal, while his heart seemed to race irregularly. When the meeting ended, Captain Morrison pulled him aside. "Rivers, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired, Captain. It's been an intense few weeks." She studied him with the sharp observation skills that had made her an excellent officer. "Have you seen medical?" "It's nothing serious. Just stress." "That was not a suggestion, Rivers. That was an order. Report to the medical officer today." Daniel nodded, knowing better than to argue with a direct command. That afternoon, he presented himself at the Palace Medical Facility. The medical officer, Dr. Patricia Walsh, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had treated countless guards over her 20 years of service. "Officer Rivers," she greeted him. "Captain Morrison called ahead and said you were coming. She mentioned you've been looking unwell. Tell me what you're experiencing." Daniel described the chest tightness, the occasional racing heart, the feeling of pressure. As he spoke, he realized these symptoms had actually started the day of the rescue, immediately after his sprint. He had just been too distracted by everything else to pay attention. Dr. Walsh listened carefully, taking notes. "Let's run some tests. This is probably nothing, but chest discomfort should always be investigated, especially in someone who has undergone recent physical stress." She conducted a thorough examination, checking his blood pressure, listening to his heart and lungs, and asking detailed questions about his medical history. "Have you ever experienced anything like this before?" "Never. I've always been healthy. No heart problems in my family that I know of." "What about during your training? Any chest pain, shortness of breath, or irregular heartbeat?" Daniel thought back carefully. "There was one time during a particularly grueling endurance run. I felt dizzy and had some chest tightness, but it passed quickly. I assumed I had just pushed too hard." Dr. Walsh made a note. "I'm going to schedule you for some cardiac tests. An ECG, an echocardiogram, and a stress test. These are precautionary, but I want to rule out any underlying conditions." Over the next week, Daniel underwent the battery of tests. He tried not to worry, telling himself this was a routine procedure. But late at night, alone in his quarters, doubt crept in. What if something was seriously wrong? What if his career was over before it had truly begun? The results came back on a gray Thursday afternoon. Dr. Walsh called Daniel into her office, and her expression was serious. "Officer Rivers, please sit down." Daniel's stomach dropped. Those words never preceded good news. Tests have revealed a cardiac condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a condition where the heart muscle becomes abnormally thick, making it harder for your heart to pump blood effectively. Daniel stared at her, trying to process the words. "I don't understand. I've never had any problems. I passed all my physical exams." This condition can be silent for years, showing no symptoms. The extreme physical exertion during your rescue, combined with the massive adrenaline surge, likely triggered the symptoms you're now experiencing. The sprint may have saved Emma, but it also revealed a serious underlying problem. Can it be fixed? Surgery or medication? Dr. Walsh's expression was sympathetic. "There are treatments. Medications can help manage symptoms and reduce the risk of complications. In some cases, surgery is necessary. But Daniel, I need to be honest with you about what this means for your career." Daniel felt his world beginning to crumble. "I can't be a guard anymore. The Royal Guard requires peak physical conditioning and the ability to perform under extreme physical stress. With this condition, sudden intense exertion could trigger a cardiac event, a heart attack, stroke, or sudden cardiac arrest. I cannot, in good conscience, clear you for active duty. The risk is too high." The office seemed to spin. Daniel had worked his entire adult life toward this goal. 5 years of training, countless sacrifices. All of it ending just 2 weeks after achieving his dream. "How long do I have before I have to leave?" "There will be a formal medical board review, but the recommendation will be medical discharge." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I know this is not what you want to hear." Daniel left the medical office in a daze. He walked through the palace grounds, barely seeing the familiar surroundings. Guards he had trained with passed by, offering greetings he could barely return. Tourists took photos, unaware that the guard they were photographing would soon no longer wear the uniform. Marcus found him that evening sitting alone in the guard's common room. "The captain told me about the diagnosis." "I'm so sorry, mate." Daniel looked up at his friend. "I saved a child and lost my career. I don't know whether to feel proud or devastated. Can feel both. Those emotions aren't mutually exclusive. I've wanted this since I was 10 years old, Marcus. This was my purpose, my identity. Without it, who am I?" Marcus sat beside him. "You're the same person you were before you put on the uniform. A good man who does the right thing, even when it costs him. That doesn't change because you're not wearing red anymore." The news of Daniel's condition and impending discharge remained private initially, known only to medical staff and senior officers. But Daniel felt like he was walking through his final days in slow motion. Every duty, every ceremony, every moment in uniform carried the weight of being one of his last. Captain Morrison called him to her office a week after the diagnosis. "Rivers, I want you to know that we're going to do everything we can for you. Medical retirement with full benefits. Letters of recommendation. Job placement assistance. You served with honor, and we don't forget that. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it, but it doesn't change the reality. I'm losing the only thing I've ever wanted to do. You're losing a uniform, Rivers. You're not losing your character or your courage or your commitment to serving others. Those qualities will serve you well in whatever comes next." Daniel wanted to believe her, but the future felt impossibly empty. What did life look like without the structure and purpose of military service? What could possibly fill the void that losing this dream would create? 3 weeks after Daniel's diagnosis, the medical board convened at the military facility. Daniel wore his dress uniform, sensing it might be one of the last times. The board consisted of 3 senior medical officers and 2 Palace Guard Command representatives. They reviewed his test results, medical history, specialist reports thoroughly. Dr. Walsh presented the medical evidence to the board. Daniel had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a genetic condition affecting the heart muscle. The condition was likely present since birth but remained undetected until triggered by extreme physical exertion during Emma's rescue. Given the unpredictable nature of guard duties requiring sudden, intense physical response, continuing active service presented unacceptable risks to his health and life. The board questioned Daniel about his symptoms, understanding of the condition, and awareness of risks. He answered honestly, maintaining composure despite feeling his heart being torn apart. The decision was unanimous. Medical discharge with full honors, effective in 30 days. Daniel would retain all benefits and receive medical care for his condition. Each signature and stamp felt like a countdown to everything ending. News of Daniel's discharge became public. Media outlets that had celebrated his heroism now reported the heartbreaking cost of his courage. Headlines read, "Hero Guard's career ends after saving child and Royal Guard loses everything to save girl." Public reaction was swift and emotional. Social media exploded with opinions. Some blamed the military for not detecting his condition earlier. Others criticized physical demands on guards. Many expressed sadness that a hero was losing his career. Emma's parents, Sarah and James, learned about Daniel's situation from news reports. They were devastated. Sarah immediately called Captain Morrison, requesting permission to see Daniel. The meeting was arranged at the palace. When Daniel entered, Sarah's eyes were red from crying. "We didn't know saving Emma would cost you your career. If we could change it somehow," Daniel interrupted gently. "Please don't say that. I would make the same choice 1,000 times. Emma is safe. That matters more than anything else." James stepped forward. "But your career, your dream, you gave up everything," Daniel corrected him. "I didn't give it up. I made a choice to act when a child was in danger. The medical condition was always there, hiding. The rescue revealed it but didn't create it. Discovering it now probably saved my life. I could have had a heart attack during training with no one around to help." Emma approached with tears, understanding more now. "It's my fault you can't be a soldier anymore." Daniel knelt to her level. "Emma, listen carefully. Nothing about this is your fault. You're a child who got separated from her teacher. That could happen to anyone. The man who tried to hurt you is the only person at fault. I chose to help you because that's what good people do." Emma looked down. "But now you're sad," Daniel admitted honestly. "I am sad about losing my job, but I'm not sad that I saved you. Those are 2 different things. Every time I think about you being safe with your parents, I feel happy. That happiness is worth the sadness about my career." Sarah and James became determined to support Daniel. They contacted news outlets, sharing their perspective on his sacrifice. They started a fundraising campaign for his medical expenses and civilian life transition. The response was overwhelming. Thousands contributed. Wanting to help the guard who had given so much, Daniel felt uncomfortable with the attention and charity. He hadn't acted for recognition or reward. But Captain Morrison encouraged him to accept support gracefully. Let people help you, Rivers. When you saved Emma, you gave people hope. You reminded them that good people exist, that heroism is real. Let them express their gratitude. As Daniel's final days in uniform approached, the palace organized a special ceremony. Colonel Ashworth insisted Daniel's service, though brief, deserved formal recognition. On a cool October morning, Daniel stood in the palace courtyard surrounded by fellow guards, senior officers, and invited guests including Emma's family. Colonel Ashworth addressed the assembly. We honor Officer Daniel Rivers, whose service exemplified the highest ideals of the Royal Guard. In a moment of crisis, he placed duty and compassion above protocol and personal interest. His actions saved a child from harm. His character during this difficult transition has shown grace and dignity. The colonel pinned a special commendation medal on Daniel's uniform. The assembled guards saluted. Emma and her parents watched with tears streaming. Marcus Webb stood at attention, jaw clenched with emotion. Daniel spoke, his voice catching. I joined the Royal Guard because I believed in service and protection. My time in this uniform was brief, but it taught me more about courage and purpose than I imagined possible. I don't regret my choice. A child is safe because I acted. That will always matter more than any career or uniform. The ceremony concluded with the traditional passing of his ceremonial sword. Daniel removed his uniform for the last time, dressing in civilian clothes that felt strange. Marcus found him before he left. You'll always be a guard to me, Daniel. The uniform doesn't make the man. Walking out of the palace gates as a civilian felt surreal. Tourists moved around him, unaware that the ordinary-looking man was recently one of the guards. They photographed the fundraising campaign exceeded expectations. Over £100,000 was raised, covering medical expenses and providing financial stability. People sent letters and messages. Parents thanked him. Veterans praised his service. Teachers used his story to teach about sacrifice. One letter particularly moved Daniel. A teenage boy wrote, I used to think heroes were people with superpowers. You showed me that heroes are ordinary people who make brave choices. You lost your dream job but saved a little girl. That taught me some things matter more than our own plans. Dr. Walsh started Daniel on medication to manage his heart condition. The treatment was effective, reducing symptoms significantly. With proper management, he could live a full life, though high-intensity physical activity would be limited. Many people live productive, happy lives with this condition, she assured him. Emma's family invited Daniel to dinner weeks after his discharge. Their home was warm and welcoming. Emma greeted him with a drawing depicting a tall figure in a red coat holding a small girl's hand. During dinner, Sarah and James shared their own struggles. James had lost his job 2 years earlier and gone through depression before finding new work. When James lost his job, we thought our life was over, Sarah said. But it forced him to pursue something he'd always dreamed about. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. Over the following months, opportunities emerged. A security consulting firm offered him a training position. A veterans charity asked him to speak at fundraising events. A publisher approached about writing a book. Daniel accepted the training position, finding satisfaction in teaching others. The work felt like service, protecting people indirectly. 6 months after leaving the palace, Colonel Ashworth invited Daniel back for a private meeting. Rivers, the protocols you helped develop are now official policy. Your experience helped create better protection for guards and civilians. The colonel continued with even more significant news. The man who attempted to abduct Emma has been arrested. He was connected to several other attempted child abductions. Your intervention likely saved multiple children from harm. This news hit Daniel deeply. He had saved not just Emma, but potentially many other children. The ripple effects of that moment kept expanding in ways he could never have predicted. Proving that his sacrifice had meaning far beyond what he initially understood, Colonel Ashworth gestured for Daniel to sit, and the formality softened. The colonel poured tea, surprising Daniel with this personal gesture given their rank difference. They sat across from each other as the colonel's expression became less official. "There is something else I want to discuss, Rivers. When you ran across that plaza to save Emma, you made a decision many people never face. You chose between following orders and following your conscience. You chose between personal safety and protecting another." Daniel listened intently, unsure where this led. "I have served 40 years in the military," the colonel continued. "I have seen combat, commanded men in dangerous situations, and made decisions affecting lives. In all that time, I learned that true courage is not the absence of fear or doubt. It is acting despite those feelings, because something matters more than your own comfort." The colonel sipped his tea. "Your medical discharge was necessary from a policy standpoint. We cannot risk guards with cardiac conditions collapsing during duty. But I want you to understand something, Rivers. You are more of a soldier than most people who wear the uniform for decades. The essence of service is sacrifice. You embodied that completely." Daniel felt emotion rising in his throat. These words meant more than any medal. "Everyone in the Guard recognizes what you did and what it cost you. You are part of our brotherhood forever, regardless of whether you wear the uniform." Daniel managed to speak, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, sir. That means everything to me." They talked for another hour, the colonel sharing stories from his career. Moments of doubt and decision that shaped his life. He spoke about times when he had failed and how those experiences taught him as much as his successes. As Daniel left the palace that day, he felt peace he had not experienced since his diagnosis. The loss of his career still hurt, but it no longer defined him. He was someone who had acted with courage when it mattered most. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following year. Daniel's work with the security training company flourished. His real-world experience and story gave him credibility that resonated with trainees. He taught decision-making under pressure, ethical choices in difficult situations, and the importance of maintaining humanity while enforcing security. One student was a young woman named Rachel Torres, who had experienced trauma and was rebuilding her life through security work. She struggled with confidence, doubting whether she had the strength to handle difficult situations. Daniel worked with her patiently. "Strength is not about being fearless," he told her during training. "Strength is about being afraid and still doing what needs to be done. The day I ran to save Emma, I was terrified. I did not know if I was making the right choice, but I acted anyway because the alternative was unacceptable." Rachel absorbed his words, and over time, her confidence grew. She eventually told Daniel that his mentorship had changed her life. These moments of impact, smaller and quieter than saving Emma, but no less meaningful, became the texture of Daniel's new life. Emma and her family remained close to Daniel. He became like an uncle to Emma, attending her school performances and birthday celebrations. Watching her grow provided concrete evidence that his sacrifice had meaning. Emma spoke about him often to her classmates, not as an abstract hero, but as someone real who cared about her. On the one-year anniversary of the rescue, Palace organized a small private ceremony. Daniel was invited back along with Emma's family to mark the occasion. It was an internal recognition of how that day had changed multiple lives and improved Palace security protocols. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Major, greeted Daniel warmly. They walked together through the palace grounds, past the very spot where Daniel had made his sprint. Tourists milled about, completely unaware of the significance of that location. "We use your story in training now," the Major said thoughtfully. "Not to glorify breaking protocol, but to teach guards about threat assessment. You helped us understand that discipline and compassion are not opposites." The ceremony was simple. Colonel Ashworth spoke briefly about the importance of that day. Emma, now 7 years old and more articulate, read a letter she had written with her parents' help. "Dear Daniel," she read in her clear child's voice. "1 year ago, you saved me when I was scared and lost. You ran fast like a superhero even though it was hard. You lost your job because you helped me, and that makes me sad sometimes. But my mummy says you are happy now doing different good things. I want you to know that I remember what you did every day. When I am scared, I think about how brave you were, and it helps me be brave too. Thank you for being my hero, and my friend. Love, Emma. There was not a dry eye in the room. Daniel accepted the letter, knowing he would treasure it forever. He knelt down and hugged Emma, this little girl who had inadvertently changed the entire course of his life. During the reception, Daniel found himself in conversation with Marcus Webb, who had continued to excel as a royal guard. "Do you miss it?" Marcus asked. "The uniform, the ceremony, being part of the guard?" Daniel considered the question honestly. "I miss parts of it. The camaraderie, the sense of purpose, the tradition. But I have found new purpose, Marcus. Different but meaningful. I teach people skills that protect others. I speak to young people about courage. I watch Emma grow up safe and happy. Those things matter." "You have handled this with more grace than most people could manage," Marcus observed. "Losing your dream could have made you bitter. Instead, you found new ways to serve." Daniel smiled. "I had good examples. Captain Morrison, Colonel Ashworth, you all showed me what it means to serve with integrity." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah and James approached Daniel. James carried a framed photograph of Daniel running across the plaza, the moment frozen in time. The image captured the determination on his face, the uniform streaming behind him. "We had this made for you," Sarah said. "So you remember that moment, what you did, and why it mattered." Daniel took the frame, studying the image. He barely recognized the man in the photo. That version of Daniel had been a royal guard on his first day, full of pride and purpose. The current Daniel was something different, shaped by loss and growth, but perhaps stronger for it. That evening, alone in his apartment, Daniel hung the photograph on his wall. He stood back and looked at it, reflecting on everything that had happened since that frozen moment. He had lost his career, his uniform, and his initial dream. But he had gained something too, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered and the knowledge that he had made a difference when it counted. Most his phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Walsh. His latest cardiac checkup showed his condition remained stable. The medication was working well, and his prognosis was excellent. He could expect a normal lifespan and quality of life. Daniel looked again at the photograph and made peace with his journey. He had been given a choice between protocol and compassion, between career and conscience. He had chosen according to his values, and while the consequences had been painful, he would not change his decision. Life would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. The uniform he had worn so briefly did not define him. His character did. His choices did. His willingness to sacrifice for others did. Emma was safe. Other children had been protected. Security protocols had improved. Young people were inspired by his story. His students were learning valuable skills and lessons. These were the true measures of his impact, more meaningful than any rank or position. As Daniel prepared for bed that night, he thought about Colonel Ashworth's words about true courage being action, despite fear and doubt. He thought about Emma's letter and her innocent gratitude. He thought about the life stretching ahead of him, uncertain, but full of possibility. He had sprinted 200 yards across a plaza and changed everything. The cost had been high, but the value was incalculable. A child lived safely because of those seconds of decision and action. Daniel turned off the light and settled into sleep, his heart steady and strong, beating out the rhythm of a life well lived, a sacrifice well made, and a purpose continuously renewed. The guard who had given everything for a moment of heroism had found that true service never really ends. It just takes different forms, each one valuable, each one meaningful, each one another chance to make the world a little better than it was before.